Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 28 preview. So, Week 28 is where we start the bumper weeks heading into the end of the season. There are 2 weeks of regular play left, weeks 28 and week 29. This is where we will see some teams make up for lost time that they accrued at the start of the season, such as Vancouver Titans, London Spitfire, Seoul Dynasty as well. The Los Angeles Gladiators also fell a little bit behind. I think it's not ideal. I think this could have been done in a better way. I've already made a video about the schedule for these last 2 weeks, a little bit back along when it was announced. I don't think this is optimal. I think this could have been done better, but we're not going to go on about that in this video. This is where we're going to take a look ahead of the fixtures we are going to see. If you missed the meta preview that took place earlier this week, earlier today, I should say, there is a hero pool for these 2 weeks coming up. It will mean that Brigitte, Zarya, Tracer, and Genji are all out of rotation, which means we are going to see some very different stuff compared to what we saw in the previous 2 weeks during the Countdown Cup and prior to that as well. It probably means we're going to see quite a bit of double barrier Risa Sigma, unfortunately, which will benefit some teams and not others. But anyway, we are going to start off on Friday, August the 14th at 9 AM because we are getting, yes, 3 days of APAC play during this week because we are going to be kicked off by the London Spitfire taking on the Seoul Dynasty. New London versus Old London. We have seen this once before during this season. This was during the Summer Showdown where they got to take each other on in those knockout tournaments. It ended up being a win for the Seoul Dynasty in the end. So, the question is, can the London Spitfire do anything differently to try and change a result here? Well, the meta is more favourable for the London Spitfire. I think if they were forced into a Winston Zarya comp against the Seoul Dynasty, I think this would have been an absolute pasting. London Spitfire had a very rough Countdown Cup. They had a very, very rough July, and they need to turn things around. They really, really need to turn things around. Because at the moment, I have them on paper to lose the rest of their games for this season, because they've looked so darn shoddy. But this was the J-Mac Winston, and we're not expecting to see that at the moment. So, what will we see? We will probably see a Risa Sigma. Now, Seoul were pretty confident on that comp a while ago, but now they kind of gravitated more towards the Winston Zarya, and now they're going to have to go back to this Risa Sigma, which probably means we're going to see more Marvel, unless they decide to put Toyu in on the Sigma, which could be rather interesting if they do. Although he didn't look rather convincing on the Sigma at the end of their play against Hangzhou Spark in the Countdown Cup. So, London Spitfire will be able to move back to the Risa Sigma, whether it be J-Mac or Jihan. Let's all pray for Jihan. So I think that's a big plus for the London Spitfire. Also, I think the DPS meta may be a bit more in their favour, depending on whether we see Sombra or not. But I still can't look past the Seoul Dynasty here. I still think they're going to have too much experience and too much calibre for London Spitfire to take them down. Although they do play them twice during this week. Yeah, because, scheduling in the Overwatch League, that's how it works. But, yeah, I still think this is probably a 3-1 for the Seoul Dynasty, I would say. But, yeah, there's a lot of preparation for London Spitfire, and it's going to be a rough one, especially with London Spitfire's other game this week. But moving to 8 PM on the same day, we have the Florida Mayhem taking on the Vancouver Titans. Vancouver Titans, it's been a little bit rough. They got a win over the Boston Uprising in a qualification match for the Countdown Cup, but they haven't really had much else to cheer about, have they? All they can do is pray that Echo becomes meta. That's all I can say. Shockwave looks great on the Echo. That's it. Florida Mayhem, however, a lot of great stuff in there. Gargoyle will be back on his trademark Sigma. We will see Fate on the Orisa. And I think that is the best look for the Florida Mayhem. Yaki won't have to play the Genji, but also he won't have to Tracer. So it'll be interesting to see what Yaki runs. I think BQB will be fine. He'll be on the Widow or the Ashe, so he'll be fine. But it'll be interesting to see what Yaki is on. Yaki Sombra we haven't really seen, although he should have a good Sombra. And I still don't see past the Florida Mayhem for this one. I think it'll be a 3-0 in the end. At 10 PM, we will see the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Dallas Fuel. Dallas Fuel, they may have been in disarray, but they still got to win in the Countdown Cup, although they did bow out to the San Francisco Shock, but that's nothing unusual. Los Angeles Gladiators, they had a good showing in the Countdown Cup. I still think the Gladiators are a better team than the Dallas Fuel, and I still think there's going to be a little bit of a hangover from the rough week back along from the Dallas Fuel, so I still think the Gladiators will be able to get a win over this Fuel side. I think it may be a 3-1 or a 3-2, depends how much courage and fight the Dallas Fuel can muster. Then moving on to the Saturday, we'll see at 9 AM the New York Excelsior taking on the Seoul Dynasty. So this is an interesting one. I think this will be a New York Excelsior win, I'm not going to lie. Seoul Dynasty's track record in the regular season is not brilliant. They tend to be able to get wins against the likes of Chengdu Hunters. They haven't taken on London in the regular season yet, so we're not quite convinced about that. But for Seoul, it's more of a make sure you get your 2 wins over the London Spitfire and you'll be hunky-dory. Your seeding will be fine and all that. This New York Excelsior match, New York are good, and I still think Seoul Dynasty have the quality in which to beat the New York Excelsior. Will they do it? I don't think they will. I think this is the regular season. I think this is where New York Excelsior thrive, and I think New York Excelsior will get a 3-1 victory here. Then at 11 AM, we will see the Shanghai Dragons taking on the London Spitfire. So, actually, I mean, this is obviously much tougher than the Seoul Dynasty prospect that the London Spitfire have this weekend. But this was the last time that London Spitfire, I think, picked up a map. So, yeah. The last time we saw this was during week 24 or 25, I think it was 25. And we were in the Ball Zaria sort of area. We were in the Chengdu zone, really, weren't we? And, well, Shanghai, Fearless didn't look as confident on the Wrecking Ball, and London got a 5 map out of this, but it ended up as a 3-2 to Shanghai. I don't think it'll be that close this time. I think Shanghai will be more dominant because we will see more of Issa Sigma, and I think they'll just outclass the Spitfire on those heroes, especially if we see Sombra. We've seen London struggle with Lip on the Sombra before. You know, in regards, you know, Shui was playing the Genji at that time. But we've seen London Spitfire struggle with that Sombra pick from the Shanghai Dragons. So if we see more Sombra from the Shanghai, I think London will probably get pretty swiftly swept along here. So I would expect a 3-0 for the Shanghai Dragons. Moving back to NA, at 8 PM on the Saturday, we will see Atlanta Reign taking on the Paris Eternal. Again, there is a step between these two teams. Atlanta Reign part of the chasing pack, Paris Eternal part of the top pack. Paris Eternal did not have the Countdown Cup that they would have liked, bowing out to the Philadelphia Fusion, but they're still a very good team. The only way I see this perhaps turning out as a bit of an erroneous result is because of the lack of Genji. And if we don't see Doomfist, then Sparkle may not be as powerful as he previously was. Of course, that means, what are we going to see otherwise? If we see Sombra, I don't expect to see Sparkle in the lineup. We may see more Soon Exy. We may see more XZ Nico. We might see more Soon Nico. I still think the Paris Eternal will have too much for this Atlanta Reign side, but it could be closer than we expect. I will give it a 3-1 for the Paris Eternal. Moving on to 10 PM, and we'll see the Vancouver Titans taking on the Dallas Fuel. Now, Dallas Fuel, you really put my mind at rest getting that win over the Washington Justice, however close it was. So I think they will have enough quality to see past the Vancouver Titans. Vancouver Titans may make this close, closer than it should be. But if I was going to go for a result here, I think 3-1 for the Dallas Fuel is not beyond the realms of possibility. I think the tank line is much better for the Dallas Fuel with no Gamsu. I think the supports are great for the Fuel compared to the Vancouver Titans. And the DPS of the Titans, well, it's Shockwave, isn't it? It's just Shockwave, Shockwave, Shockwave. And I don't think he's going to be able to... I mean, he'll have an impact, but him alone is not going to be able to carry Vancouver Titans to a win here, I don't think. Moving into the Sunday, and at midnight, we see Boston Uprising taking on Los Angeles Gladiators. Well, if I remember rightly, the last time we had this fixture, the Gladiators bloody lost. So, Gladiators, I hope you've learnt your lesson, because you do not want to be losing to the Boston Uprising. No, 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 no. Don't want to be seeing it. So, I would expect a 3-0 for the Gladiators, providing there's no slip-ups. Gladiators. But moving on from that, and at 2 AM on the Sunday, we will be seeing the San Francisco Shock take on the Philadelphia Fusion. This is a rematch of the Countdown Cup final, which did end up as a 4-2 to the San Francisco Shock. So, will this change this time around? That's the question. I honestly think it may be more favourable to the San Francisco Shock than it was then, with Double Barrier probably being the mainstay for this week, these 2 weeks, and less Genji being played, which means San Francisco Shock are going to be a bit more comfortable. Even though Rascal looks good on the Genji, Philadelphia do have Ivy and EQO, who are really, really good Genjis. So, yeah, I think we're going to see perhaps Shock take another, like, 3-1 victory here. Another connotation that could be had for this this matchup is that the Fusion are currently above the Shock in the standings, the overall standings, but they are only above them by 1 win. So if Fusion were to lose this match, Shock will regain 2nd place in the league and be top of North America. Although it is pretty likely the Shock will be getting that anyway, considering they have 3 matches in hand over the Philadelphia Fusion. So this has some stake to it, and I'm sure whoever wins this match will stake their claim to being the best in NA right now. I still think the Shock are going to be a little bit better, so a 3-1, 3-2 would be what I would say in favour of the Shock, but Philadelphia Fusion, they have the ability to get a win. I just don't know whether they will. So moving on to the Sunday properly then, and at 9 AM we will see, yes, once again, the Seoul Dynasty taking on the London Spitfire. Again, same as I said earlier, I still think Seoul Dynasty have got too much for this Spitfire squad. It would be a weird occurrence if it was like 1 win each this weekend. That would be a weird occurrence considering it's exactly the same meta and everything. Maybe we see London lose in the first game but win the second game because they learn. But I think it's too little time to really make significant changes to what they did, especially with the Shanghai Dragons match as well. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit rough. So I still think this could be a 3-1 for the Seoul Dynasty. This is the only APAC match that day though, so we move all the way to the 8 PM on Sunday and we'll see San Francisco Shock in action again, but this time against the Toronto Defiant. Again, this is definitely the easier game for the Shock. I would expect the Shock to 3-0 the Toronto Defiant. Toronto Defiant have looked decent, but Agilities won't be playing that Genji. So that is what Toronto have looked so good on when they've been able to put Agilities on Genji and stuff like that. And without that, I really don't see Toronto getting any traction whatsoever. So San Francisco Shock should get a 3-0 win here. Then at 10 PM we have the Florida Mayhem taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. Again, Mayhem and Valiant. There's two sort of anomalies here. There's Yaki who can't play the Tracer or the Genji, and there's also the absence of Tracer and Genji for the Valiant, which KSF has looked great on the Genji, and Shax has looked great on the Tracer. I think both teams have fantastic potential on the Ashe, obviously. But I still think the Florida Mayhem are going to be a little bit too good for the Valiant. But there is potential for an upset here. This could be quite a close match. I would go for a 3-2 for the Florida Mayhem though. And the last game of the weekend is at 12 AM on the Monday, the midnight game, which will be the Vancouver Titans taking on the Atlanta Reign. Atlanta Reign, I think they're stabilizing somewhat. We won't be seeing the saucy Genji, so I guess some people will be pleased with that and some people won't. But I think Atlanta Reign should again have too much for the Vancouver Titans. It should be a little bit of an easier prospect to get something out of for the Titans compared to the Mayhem match. We did see obviously the Mayhem 3-0 the Atlanta Reign last week, but I still think the Atlanta Reign should be the better team here and get a 3-1. I'm not going to say it's going to be a sweep, I think it'll be a 3-1 for the Atlanta Reign. But those are fixtures, all 13 of them. We get to see London Spitfire 3 times, we get to see Seoul Dynasty 3 times, we get to see Vancouver Titans 3 times. Next week we will get to see Los Angeles Gladiators 3 times. So yeah, there's some teams with a very busy schedule. It is what it is, but I still think it's a scheduling mishap by the Overwatch League, I'm not going to lie. But it is what it is. It's going to be a pretty big week for London. It's going to be a pretty big week for the Titans in some respects. Not going to lie. Their easiest match is probably the Dallas Fuel. And we will see where it goes. There can be a lot of changes in like seeding places for the overall players and stuff like that through these matches. So it's going to be really interesting. And we're back to double barrier, unfortunately. So yeah, there's a downside to everything, right? But it's hotting up. Playoffs are not far away, so these games make all of the difference. But for now, Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.